Egyptologists, and they weren't. Half of them were members of Spalding's church, as Hugh Nibley pointed out years ago, and Klaus Baer said was a fantastic study, by the way. These Egyptologists claimed that the reconstruction of facsimile number 1 that Joseph Smith did so sloppily, and he didn't, Spalding sent very horrible copies to these scholars, claiming they were the originals, and they weren't. He cheated, even though no one acknowledges that. Several of the Egyptologists said, this is nothing but a mummy. It's not a person alive. It's a dead mummy, and he's being embalmed. That was one of the descriptions of facsimile number 1. Lanny Bell destroys that argument. We now have an Egyptologist who actually shows that the person on that lion couch is alive. That's in favor of Joseph Smith saying it's Abraham getting ready to be sacrificed. It is a living person on facsimile number 1. We have Lanny Bell saying that. Now, Lanny Bell on page 24 in his footnote 23, he's discussing the idea of the Phallic nature of the person on the lion couch. Now, this is Charles Larson's reconstruction. Now, the Tanners have made fun of the facsimile 2 figure 7 for being Phallic, the God on his throne. And they really lambasted us for having pornography in the scriptures. At my Sunstone presentation, I had a gentleman come up who said, this is nothing but pornography. Let me crystallize something for you folks who know nothing about the Egyptian religion. Let me show a non-Mormon scholar and Egyptologist Lanny Bell's ideas. Here is how the Egyptologists properly understand the ancient Egyptian religion. And it's not stupidly pornography. That is a modern bias, and it's false. Here's Lanny Bell. You won't pay attention to us Mormons. Will you pay attention to the non-Mormon Egyptologists? That's the question. Here's what he says. Far from being ancient pornography, this is an important mytho-theological icon, the Phallic nature of the figures. He says, dead and dismembered nevertheless, Osiris is being brought back to life. This is not a mummy. Those of you who pretend it's a mummy, you're wrong. The vitality of this restored life is demonstrated by the ability of Osiris to raise an erection and impregnate Isis. That is the theme. That is what the symbolism is showing us. It's not pornography. I have an Egyptologist saying so now. I've already quoted other Egyptologists saying so, but they've been LDS, they're biased, they don't know what they're talking about, so perhaps a non-Mormon Egyptologist can now straighten your corrupt minds out. Osiris was actually associated with the promise of rebirth or resurrection. We have said that for decades. Now will you pay attention? Because now a non-Mormon Egyptologist is saying this also. Klaus Baer said that. John Wilson said that. They've been singing to the choir of anti-Mormons because anti-Mormons aren't paying attention. He was naturally associated with the fertility of the living soil of Egypt. This is what the symbolism is trying to portray. Even though Charles Larson is wrong in making the figure in facsimile number 1 Phallic, the figure in the hypocephalus, if it is Phallic, that wouldn't be pornography, according to the Egyptological understanding as of 2008. Now on page 25, Dr. Bell says something else that Hugh Nibley had noted 42 years ago, and he was virtually laughed to scorn over this. So you'll laugh at the LDS scholarship, that's fine. Are you also going to laugh at the non-LDS Egyptologists? that may not work out so well anymore. You're claiming that they are totally against anything the LDS scholarship has said. Let's listen to Lanny Bell again. Page 25. The frequently represented scene of Anubis attending the deceased's mummy lying on the funerary bier shows numerous iconographic variations. When we examine the details, we find normally the individual lying on the bier is mummiform. Both the kilt and the striding legs of the figure who has thus already shed his mummy bindings, the bonds of death, are relatively rare. But here is what they show when we have them, and this is what we have in our facsimile number 1. Lanny Bell, the non-Mormon Egyptologist. I'm going to make a big deal about this on purpose because this is significant. The restoration of movement to the legs indicates a major step in the resurrection progress. The critics against the facsimile number 1 interpretation of it being a living person are simply outdated and wrong and Egyptologically ignorant. This is a resurrection. This is not a dead man on that facsimile number 1. It is a living, moving man. According to the movement with the leg up and the hands up by the face, this is the beginning of him being resurrected. That's according to Lanny Bell. He says, the god Osiris is represented nude and Phallic on the lion bier in the process of rejuvenation. This is in a Theban tomb in the Louvre. He says the non-mummiform, he lies on his back with striding legs, one hand raised to his head or his face, and the other one lying at his side. This movement depicts the resurrection. It's the exact same figure, except there's 2 hands coming up to the face in facsimile number 1, not just one. But the leg is definitely striding. He's wearing a kilt. This is no mummy. Not at all. The hieroglyphs in another one say they identify the god as Osiris Res Wedja, one who reawakens, whole or intact. Even the hieroglyphs on the lion couch in one of these lion couch scenes shows that when the figure on it has a leg up and hands to the face, he is being resurrected. This is what our facsimile number 1 is showing. A living person, not a dead mummy. Let me say this another way so that you can get the impact of this. You critics who are arguing that this is a dead mummy instead of a living person like Joseph Smith interpreted the scene to be, you are simply wrong. The Egyptological evidence of other lion couches with their inscriptions describing the person with his leg raised and his hands to his face, that description in the inscriptions with the lion couches with that form proves that person is alive. Joseph Smith has the Egyptological evidence in his favor here. He's not wrong. I want you to understand that. And I finally arrive at one of the most interesting parts of Lanny Bell's paper, because I believe he is inconsistent here. It's so interesting. I believe his bias begins to show up a little bit. Even though he claims he doesn't have any prejudices, I think he does. Luke Wilson wasn't going to let him get away with not mentioning this. However, from the Egyptological viewpoint, Lanny Bell's inconsistency shows here. Here's what he says on page 25 in footnote 27. He says, Anubis depicted with the mummy, the deceased on the bier, and so on and so forth. There's various different types of situations that are illustrated. But he says,